Welcome and thanks for coming out tonight. Senator Hutchison is our Elizabeth B. and Dennis B. Visiting Fellow. The Visiting Fellows program was established in 1975 to bring individuals to Harvard who have dedicated their lives to government or public service. The program was designed to provide maximum contact between those individuals and undergraduates at the college. Former Visiting Fellows have included correspondent Dan Rather, President Oscar Arias, Speaker Tom Foley, and political activist Jane Fonda and Ted Turner. I'd like to extend a special thank you to Senator Hutchison for all the time she has donated and given to us today. She arrived this morning about 9 o'clock and has spent about every minute since then with the undergraduates. The senator met with various groups, including the College Republican Club, the Harvard Model Senate, and the Women's Leadership Conference. All the students have truly enjoyed spending time with her and conversing with her throughout the day. I now have the honor to introduce our moderator, Swanee Hunt. Ambassador Hunt is the director of the Women and Public Policy program here at the Kennedy School, where she also teaches. Prior to this appointment in 1997, she served 4 years as the American ambassador to Austria, where she's one of the longest-serving ambassadors in decades. While in Austria, Ambassador Hunt worked extensively with Bosnian women and religious leaders and was named Woman of Peace by the Together for Peace Foundation in Rome. And without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce a native of Dallas, Texas, Ambassador Hunt.
Thank you. To give you just a little sense of what a privilege this is for me, I was in the restroom. This is a restroom story. I was in the restroom before coming up here, and I noticed the woman who was washing her hands did a double take because she'd never seen me with this hairstyle, and I was very proud of my Texas hairstyle for today. In honor of you, Senator Hutchison. That's right. And so I said to this woman, I look different, don't I? She said, yeah, you're wearing shoes. So I've really gone all out for you. Kay Bailey Hutchison. Has such a wonderful ring to those of us from Dallas to hear her name. She's a household name across Texas as the first woman to represent Texas in the Senate. You all know much of her background. Let me just recap the highlights. In January of '97, she joined the Senate Appropriations Committee, which of course is an extremely powerful position. And there she has the opportunity to shape United States defense policy. She's particularly been a very strong advocate for military personnel and their families, and insisting on increased readiness and support for the armed forces. In addition, she sits on the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, where she chairs the Subcommittee on Surface Transportation and Merchant Marine. I am particularly pleased to announce that she sponsored and passed the federal anti-stalking bill and the homemaker IRA legislation that substantially expanded retirement opportunities for stay-at-home spouses. She's been very involved in the welfare reform and serves as the Deputy Majority Whip. Do you get tired listening to these things? Yes. She also is the co-chair of the Congressional Oil and Gas Caucus, which is not where you would want to be these days. And her opinion pieces on tax policy and defense issues have been published in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, LA Times, and of course, every daily in Texas. She started out in the Texas House and became the Texas State Treasurer, where she trimmed her agency's budget significantly and spearheaded the successful fight against a state income tax. The last 2 times I was with Kay Bailey Hutchison were very intense experiences. One was the Easter service at First Baptist Church in Dallas, and if you all want an intense experience, drop in on First Baptist Church in Dallas on Easter. It is moving. But the last time is really emblazoned in my mind as we sat together with 14 women, many of them refugees from all over Bosnia, and they pled for a continuation of the troop support to support the peace there. It was a very, very moving occasion, and Senator Hutchison listened very carefully, and I must say how much I admired her for going to the trouble and making the effort to be there and to hear from people who were living it at the grassroots. So you can imagine how good I feel this afternoon to introduce my friend, Kay Bailey Hutchison.
Well, thank you, Sawani. I really appreciate your coming and especially making the ultimate sacrifice of a big Texas hairdo just to make me feel welcome. You know, when it was mentioned that Dan Rather had preceded me as a fellow that spent time here with the students at Harvard, Dan is a Texan and a friend of mine, and I love Dan Rather's comment that he always advises his friends to try, if at all possible, to marry a Texas woman, because no matter how bad things get, she's seen it worse. Well, I want to say that I have so enjoyed my time here together with the students. And I have to say that my friend Alan Simpson, and Ann is here. Alan had to leave, but Ann is with me. And Alan was one of my great friends in the Senate. And he has loved his time here. And he and Ann have spent a longer period than they even thought they would. And your gain is certainly our loss in the United States Senate with Alan Simpson being part of your team. I also want to say that I have been so pleased at the interaction I've had with the students to see that there is a lot of openness to ideas, a lot of diversity of ideas, and I am very pleased to see that because we all know that we have the best and the brightest right here, and that you are exposing your best and brightest to all different kinds of views, I think is very, very healthy, and I've been very impressed. Let me start by saying that I want to talk today about freedom and Ricky Williams and Nobel laureates. As you know, I am a proud Texan. And in Texas, we value public service and football, not necessarily in that order. So I will humbly admit to you that more people in America know that Ricky Williams is a product of the University of Texas than know that I am. And for those of you who don't follow the sports pages, of course, Ricky Williams is a running back for the University of Texas Longhorns. This past Thanksgiving weekend, Ricky Williams made football history. He shattered the 22-year NCAA record for career rushing. He needed 11 yards to break the record, but he ran 60 yards for a touchdown, and that was just in the first quarter. He gained 259 yards to shatter that record. Ricky went through a wrenching decision last year, whether to finish his senior year in college or go on and get into the pros and make millions of dollars. He opted to stay in school. He said of that decision, "I've been poor for 20 years of my life. It might as well be 21. Because he had dreams to fulfill. He wanted a college degree and he wanted to finish with his teammates. So last Friday, Ricky Williams ended his collegiate football career that garnered him a college degree and most probably the Heisman Trophy for the best college football player in America in 1998. Most important about Ricky Williams is that every American child saw another example of how freedom and hard work produce a winner. This is a story of a nice guy who did the right thing and finished first. Americans think we know about freedom. After all, in our national anthem, we talk about the land of the free. We fought wars to preserve freedom, and we've been a magnet for people and ideas from all around the world simply because we tell them, come to America and you will be free. When I'm voting in Washington, D.C., I remember that every action we take is one that will either allow the conditions of freedom to reign or will limit freedom in some way. I'm not talking about encroaching on the rights of others. You're not free to yell fire in a crowded theater. You're not free to drive an automobile if you don't have a license. But the framers of our Constitution believed that preserving individual liberty would permit individuals to achieve successes, and that would advance everyone. I'm concerned that we are beginning to lose sight of the relationship between freedom and success and a prosperous society. In fact, I sometimes wonder if we're trying to build a fence around success. Are we saying with all these government policies, you can be successful in America as long as you don't overdo it? In short, I worry that we're beginning to take freedom for granted. And I think this stems in part from the fact that many in Washington seem to think that the economic engine of America is government. Too few of our elected officials believe that the economic engine of America is business, and it is business that creates jobs and creates the economy that will keep us able to absorb more people coming into our system. So when Congress meets, so many times we are slowing the economic engine of growth. Overregulation and overtaxation can dampen and even extinguish the entrepreneurial spirit that fuels success in America. Turning an idea into success and then prosperity is a uniquely American phenomenon. That's why we remain a magnet for the brightest people in the world. Earlier this fall, we heard one announcement after another that an American scholar or scientist born in another country had won the Nobel Prize. The awards for chemistry, physics, and medicine all went to people who came to America, who chose America so that their dreams could come true. The marriage between great ideas and entrepreneurial spirit has always been an American hallmark. Our genius has been that the obscure but original ideas of these Nobel laureates would be turned into money-making, job-producing enterprises by the special alchemy that happens when freedom runs rampant, and that we would celebrate their success, both financial and creative. To maintain the climate for these brilliant scholars to be successful, they must have the freedom to try and fail and try again until they succeed. Let me tell you a story that illustrates for me why we must be vigilant to protect against overregulation by government that stifles creativity. When I was a young girl, summers were as much a time of fear as play because of the dreaded disease polio. Parents did not let their children go to swimming pools because we didn't know what caused polio, and there was no effective treatment. But through the extraordinary work of Dr. Jonas Salk, polio was eradicated in the United States. Before he died 2 years ago, Dr. Salk gave a wake-up call when he warned a congressional committee that government regulations are strangling advancements in medical research. He made a startling observation. Dr. Salk said that the methods he used to develop the polio vaccine would be illegal in today's regulatory environment. If government attempts to create a world free of risk, we could find ourselves in a dead-end society that would not be able to create the jobs that keep our economy expanding for the undergraduates that I have met today and all those who come into our country to seek the American dream. In a risk-free America, we would not have conquered our own frontiers, much less ventured into space, even after one of the space shuttles flew apart before our very eyes. But we didn't stop. We had the American spirit to go forward and continue to try, because this nation was founded by people who chose freedom over fortune and liberty over security. I believe these values are endangered today. Overregulation confuses common sense priorities. Sometimes we establish a worthy objective, such as preserving an endangered species. And with the same zeal that let us win world wars, we set out to achieve that goal, sometimes throwing common sense out the window. Let me give you an example. If there were rats in your dormitory, the administration at Harvard University would do everything they could to eradicate those rats. You'd be pretty glad they did, and so would your parents. Recently in California, though, a farmer named Tong Ming Lin faced a fine of $300,000 because he accidentally ran over a rat with his tractor while harvesting vegetables on his farm in Kern County. It turned out that the rat was called a Tipton kangaroo rat, which has feet that are a couple of millimeters longer than the feet of the rats that you would eradicate in your dorm room, and therefore it is on the endangered species list. So I wonder if we are using common sense sometimes when we have this kind of government excess. The social scientist James Bovard said in a recent book entitled Lost Rights, while courts have created new due process rights for welfare recipients, disruptive school children, and criminal defendants, the rights of farmers, homeowners, parents, and small businesses have been shredded. The modern idea of due process appears to be to permit citizens to exhaust their life savings fighting court battles against heavy-handed government agencies. Punishment through taxation is another way we may be stifling freedom and creativity. The new trend to put limits on success is to restrict participation in tax relief through a process known as means testing. For example, we passed a $500 per child tax credit for parents, but we said if you have a combined family income that is $120,000, you don't get it. So a two-income professional couple is not allowed to have the same tax cut as others. We said that you could establish a Roth IRA that we created, but not if you make more than $150,000 per couple. It seems to me that we should encourage every American to save for retirement security. It seems to me that the social engineers in Washington have not met the woman whose husband makes $150,000, who stays at home and raises her children to see him leave after 25 years of marriage with her with no job skills and no retirement security. So it seems to me that we should be looking at ways to encourage all Americans to have the same benefits, and hopefully we will not see any more of the means testing that is meant to level society or favor one segment over another. There's a principle that underlies these kinds of policies, and it's the principle that it's okay to succeed in America as long as you don't succeed too much. We're saying that the government will tell you if you've been too successful that they will decide that it's at $120,000 or $150,000, and they will transfer your excesses to someone else. I oppose this philosophy. I agree with what Ronald Reagan said. We need true tax reform that will at least make a start toward restoring for our children the American dream that wealth is denied to no one, that each individual has the right to fly as high as his strength and ability will take him. But we can't have such reform while our tax policy is engineered by people who view the tax as a means of achieving changes in our social structure. Ronald Reagan said that in 1964. Like President Reagan, I will always support those who are creating jobs and creating opportunity and creating prosperity for other people in America. The way back to the path that took America so far is to expand the choices available to individuals, maintain a good economic climate, and let people decide how to spend their own money. This principle is behind another public policy that we're discussing in Washington, and that is the future of Social Security. A few years ago, a poll found that more younger Americans believed in extraterrestrial beings than believed that Social Security would be there for them. In fact, if we don't reform Social Security, it will be bankrupt in 30 years. But we're not going to let that happen. Right now, the system is rigged against freedom because there are no choices available. You will pay a tax on your earnings, but you're not going to build a future with that contribution. We would like to change that, and I think we can have some choice in our Social Security system with some part of the Social Security tax that will allow more freedom and also more ability to accumulate something that can be passed to your children. We have a bipartisan group of senators who have said they will sign on to this kind of reform. Now we've got to work out the details, and if we can, I think we will have something that will be much better than the Social Security system that I am going to see for my lifetime. There is an example of how this has worked, and it happens in Texas. Now, it may have happened in some other counties. I just happen to know that in Texas, 3 counties opted out of Social Security before that option was closed to them. And these 3 counties opted out and instead had a private pension fund system. One of these counties was Galveston County. A truck driver who had worked for Galveston County all his life died at the age of 67, just a couple of years after he retired. Under Social Security, his widow would have gotten about $300 in death benefits. Instead, she got over $250,000 in a private account that he had built up in this system. According to the Wall Street Journal, the study of these 3 Texas counties that opted out showed that those who retire after 20 years in that system will receive 3 to 4 times the monthly benefit that they would receive under Social Security. So I believe we will be able to use this model to do something that will be better for the generations of Harvard students that I have talked to today. And I think that this is something that we can do in a bipartisan way that will be good for everyone. Let me just say that America is always going to be there for those who are in need, in a time of crisis, in a temporary displacement, or in a tragedy. But the American dream is that your own dreams are only limited by your willingness to work hard and to make them come true. And I will never walk away from that. I am an optimist. Wherever freedom has been pitted against excessive government regulations, I think freedom has won. That's the lesson of the 20th century, the century that has been called the American century. Our challenge is to continue to attract the future Nobel laureates to America to do their creative work, and to preserve the opportunities that Ricky Williams had to choose the path of hard work, to be successful, and to give his children a better start than he had. If we do this, the 21st century will be but the second American century. Thank you.
We have time for a couple of questions. You recall microphones here and upstairs. Please identify yourself and make sure that you are asking a question. And do you want to handle this?
Hi, Senator Hutchison. I just wanted to thank you for your comments today. My name is Brent Plater. I'm a master's student here at the Kennedy School. I'm a first-year student, and I'm glad you spoke a little bit about the Endangered Species Act because that's something that's been on my mind. Just a little bit more background on the case that you cited. The kangaroo rat is actually quite an impressive species, although you may disagree. One of the things about that about that scenario you just announced is there's a provision in the Endangered Species Act as it currently stands to allow landowners to go into what they call habitat conservation plans, which will allow them to develop their land and yet still conserve species. This person decided not to do that and instead mowed his land when he knew there were species there, and that's why the fine started. Now, in response to that and other case studies like that, I know you've introduced legislation which called for a moratorium on the Fish and Wildlife Service from using their best scientific judgment to list species as endangered. And to me, that is almost counterintuitive to the common sense type of regulation when you're preventing scientists from using their best scientific judgment to list things. I was wondering if you could...
Your question is?
Yes, I was wondering if you could explain to me what your proactive vision is to preserve species and protect other environmental values while still providing for these regulatory withdrawals that you're calling for. Thank you.
Yes. I introduced and passed a moratorium on new listings on endangered species until we reauthorize the Endangered Species Act, so we could in fact require that good science would be used and that voluntary programs to allow people to have habitat management and to give more power to the state environmental management. Well, in our state, it's the TNRCC, but I don't know what it's called here, but to give the states more power to work on these issues. Because the Endangered Species Act has been used for stopping development. I don't object to people stopping development if they do it because they want to stop development. But to take away a person's private property rights, to force a person not to be able to use their land that they have purchased, that they are farming and have the right to farm, I think is a taking that should be compensated by the government. Now let you talk about the rat. Let me give you a couple of other examples. In Texas, there is a part of our state that is the size of the state of Rhode Island that is set aside as habitat for the golden-cheeked warbler. You can't cut a cedar tree on that property, and it's the size of the state of Rhode Island. So people who are farmers or ranchers or people who have purchased a lot to build a house cannot cut a cedar tree. A cedar tree does two things. It absorbs water. It has caused the loss of water rights to farmers and ranchers because there are so many of them rampant now in this big area, and it causes cedar fever. It has caused such allergies that people have had to either take an allergy shot every week or they have had to sell their property and leave the area. I don't think that's common sense. I don't think it's common sense for a Barton Springs salamander to cut off the water supply of the city of San Antonio, especially when the use of common sense would allow you to take a Barton Springs salamander when the aquifer is down, put it in another habitat, let it grow and flourish. When the aquifer comes back, put it back in its natural habitat, which is what they used to do before the Endangered Species Act. So I think we can use common sense. I think we can protect the Barton Springs salamander. I think we can protect the spotted owl by putting it in a habitat that doesn't cut off hundreds of thousands of jobs for people who live in the Pacific Northwest. And I want to protect the environment, and I want to protect species that are scientifically shown to be more than an interesting rat, frankly. But I think we can do it in a common sense way that doesn't hurt people, that doesn't take away a constitutional right to private property, and doesn't hurt people's livelihoods and jobs. And I hope that we can come to terms on that so that we can do it in the right way.
Your plan, so you decide.
Okay, all right. Well, let me try to take a couple of questions. I have to leave pretty quickly because I have a plane.
Wendy
Yes.
Kaminer, I'm a fellow at Radcliffe. I was struck by the fact that in talking about freedom, you focused exclusively on economic freedom. I think we're facing some serious diminutions of political freedom, like the simple freedom to burn a flag, the freedom to support a political organization that the Attorney General doesn't like. You don't have that so much anymore under the counterterrorism bill. The counterterrorism bill and the immigration law have court stripping measures in them that create classes of unaccountable bureaucrats like INS officials, and I think that's a real threat to freedom. So I'm interested in your comments on the state of political freedom today.
Well, I mentioned the financial freedoms, the over-regulation and over-taxation, because I think we're into a dangerous trend in Congress, and I see it every day. I think individual liberties are well protected in this country, and I think they are protected by the courts, and I'm not so much worried. I would be worried if I thought there were an infringement on free speech, but I don't think we have an infringement on free speech. So I am satisfied with that, but if we did start losing our political freedoms, and it was a right that I thought was guaranteed by the Constitution, I would be talking about that too. I don't see Congress limiting those. Yes.
Senator Hutchinson, John Yao, mid-career student at Kennedy School. You spoke against means testing in our tax policy. I wonder if you could express your view in general as to whether or not our government has a role in terms of economic redistribution of wealth. Thank you.
I don't know everything that you are encompassing with that question, but I do not favor, in general, a policy of economic redistribution of wealth. I believe, and if I'm missing something in your question, I apologize, but I really believe that what is wonderful about America is that I want every child to be able to reach his or her full potential, regardless of who his or her parents were. I want public education to be strong so that every child will have that potential. And then when that child does well, I want us to celebrate it. I do not want government to say, now that you have made $1 million, I'm going to cut you off. Now that you have made $1 million, I'm not going to let you support your mother for over $10,000 a year, or I'm going to tax it as a gift. I don't want to keep your children from getting the fruits of your labor. I am glad there is a Bill Gates. I am glad there is a Michael Dell. There aren't very many people like that, because people who make $100,000 a year will never create wealth because of our tax structure. There are a few like Bill Gates and Michael Dell who are so far in the stratosphere that they will create wealth, and I'm glad they have. They've worked hard for it, they had an idea, they pursued it, and I want to celebrate that. They've created a lot of jobs, they've created a lot of millionaires, and because they have also been successful, I think is good. And I want America to go back to celebration of success, regardless of background, but based on merit. I want America to be a meritocracy, not an aristocracy, and I want us to remember to cheer for those who have done well and not limit them. And I'm going to take the last question here.
Thank you. I thought you'd like to know I'm the daughter of parents that voted for Herbert Hoover.
That's very impressive.
And then I'm glad that you're for helping the armed forces, because I did have 3 brothers who fought for all of us in World War II. But about regulations, I think they're very important, because I think that's why now the food industry has gone to pot with so many germs, et cetera. And I also think that without regulations, that's why those 2 giants merged and laid off thousands and thousands of people. And you said that the Republican Party, or some party, with freedom creates more jobs. But now with freedom, that allowed the merger to occur, and that destroyed a lot of jobs. So how would you account for that?
Well, I think that these mergers are occurring because we are not allowing our businesses to compete in the international marketplace without one arm tied behind their backs. They are going overseas to make their investments because it is so hard to invest in America, because we have so many regulations that they cannot compete with the lower prices overseas. So I think the mergers of the oil companies, for instance, are caused by not having an energy policy that produces a stable price for oil. They cannot make a profit. They are overtaxed and overregulated, and the only economies they have now are of scale. And I don't like the mergers. I wish that we could keep the separate entities, but I also think we are asking our American businesses to compete with one arm tied behind their backs. And I want those jobs to be in America, and they're going overseas because of overregulation and overtaxation. Well, thank you all. I really have enjoyed getting a chance to give you what I know is a different view than you would normally get. But I want you to know I specifically wanted to say something different. I did not want to come here and tell you what you would have heard from someone else. And I just hope that some of you take something away that's a little different, that enriches your experience. And it certainly has enriched mine to be able to spend the day here. And I hope that we have many more opportunities to exchange ideas.
And I apologize we weren't able to get to all of the questions, especially upstairs. And let's applaud a courageous woman.
Okay, well, I guess I gotta go. Okay.
There's a reception behind the podium. You're all welcome to some drinks and snacks.